know because we do have a lot of unreached. We do have a lot of music that hasn't been released, but who knows what the future holds. First and foremost, let's free Thugger, let's free anybody locked up, let's free Luwop, Lucci.
Relationship with Quan, with Rich Homie.
No, we don't have no problem.
We all got our own side. The shit start falling apart. I feel like when we start going on, we start getting booked for shows and shit. You know what I'm saying? So it was like
together.
Yeah, we all started getting booked together, and ego played a big role in it. Certain people, include myself, certain people felt like they should go last, or certain people wanted more money, and one of those. I ain't gonna say too much.
When Young Thug finally broke his silence on the passing of Rich Homie Quan, the words didn't land softly. They hit like a warning shot across a city already buzzing with rumors, alliances, and old grudges. This wasn't framed as a clean tragedy wrapped in sympathy. It came with an edge, a suggestion that what happened wasn't random, wasn't fate, and definitely wasn't simple. In a culture where silence is survival, speaking at all sent a message. Names weren't spelled out, but the implication hung heavy like smoke after something already burned.
We have a lot of unreached. We do have a lot of music that hasn't been released, but who knows what the future holds. First and foremost, let's free Thugger, let's free anybody locked up, let's free Luwop, Lucci.
The streets have always understood that success changes the temperature around you. And when money, attention, and history collide, accidents don't always stay accidental. Thug's tone wasn't reckless, but it wasn't cautious either. It sounded like someone who had seen patterns repeat too many times to ignore them again. Rich Homie Quan's rise had been loud, fast, and unforgettable. But his fall into industry limbo was quieter, layered with broken deals, strained friendships, and behind-the-scenes pressure. For years, fans watched relationships shift, collaborations dry up, and doors close without explanation. That context matters, because setups rarely start at the moment everything ends. They begin earlier, when protections fade and trust erodes. Young Thug's comments leaned into that uncomfortable truth. He pointed toward the idea that once certain people stop answering calls, others start making moves. The industry smiles for cameras, but behind that polish lives a different code, one where leverage matters more than loyalty. When someone becomes inconvenient or too unpredictable, the environment around them changes. Security slips, warnings get ignored, situations escalate. What made the reaction explode online wasn't just the claim itself, but who it came from. Young Thug isn't an outsider looking in. He's someone who shared stages, studios, and struggles with Quan. Their history carried respect mixed with rivalry, brotherhood mixed with distance. That gives weight to every word, even when those words stop short of direct accusation. Listeners picked up on the pauses, the phrasing, the careful way blame was implied without being spoken. It felt intentional, like a message meant for certain ears rather than the public at large. Social media did what it always does, dissecting every sentence, pulling clips out of context, and turning speculation into headlines. But beneath the noise, one thing was clear. Thug wasn't buying the official narrative, and he wanted others to question it too. The streets heard it, the fans debated it, and the industry stayed quiet.
On the couch since this morning. Well, he never came to bed last night. Sleep on the couch. I left him on the couch before I took my son to school this morning, put a blanket over him. And now I just checked on him again because he never got up. I don't feel a heartbeat. I don't see him breathe.
Which in itself spoke volumes. Silence, in moments like this, becomes a language of its own. It signals fear, calculation, and sometimes guilt. When powerful players refuse to respond, it doesn't calm speculation, it feeds it. Young Thug understood that dynamic perfectly. By speaking just enough, he cracked the surface without shattering it, forcing listeners to read between lines that were never meant to be public. That tension is exactly why his words stuck long after the clip ended and the cameras stopped rolling online. As the conversation spread, the focus shifted from grief to accountability, and that's where things became uncomfortable. Fans started revisiting old interviews, forgotten lyrics, and moments that once felt insignificant. Suddenly, timelines were rebuilt with fresh eyes. Industry relationships were mapped like crime scenes, with people asking who benefited, who lost, and who stayed protected. Young Thug's suggestion of a setup didn't exist in a vacuum. It tapped into a long-running belief that the music business doesn't just exploit talent, it discards it when convenient. Contracts tighten, support systems vanish, and artists are left navigating pressure alone. When something goes wrong, the system shrugs and moves on. That pattern is played out too many times to be ignored. What made Rich Homie Quan's situation sting harder was the sense that he had already been isolated. Public momentum slowed, features stopped circulating, and the machine that once pushed his name everywhere went silent. According to voices close to the scene, that kind of isolation is dangerous. It creates vulnerability. It makes people easier targets for manipulation, bad advice, and risky environments. Young Thug's comments hinted at that stage, the part of the story most people never see. By the time tragedy hits, the groundwork has already been laid. The setup isn't one moment, it's a process. It's neglect disguised as business decisions and silence framed as professionalism. The industry response was predictable. No direct denials, no clarifications, just carefully worded condolences and distance. That absence of pushback only intensified the debate. If the claims were baseless, why not shut them down immediately? Instead, the narrative was allowed to run, feeding mistrust and anger among fans who already felt burned by years of hidden dealings. Young Thug didn't push the story further, and that restraint mattered. It kept the focus on awareness rather than accusation. The message wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. Recognizing that not everything is coincidence and not every loss is unavoidable. In the end, what lingered wasn't a definitive answer, but a warning. A reminder that behind the charts, awards, and viral moments, there's a darker infrastructure that doesn't always protect its own.
So would you say that during that time period, you and Thug were really like close friends, or was it just like a convenient musical relationship and Birdman was really the thing that was keeping y'all together?
No, that was my dog. That was my dog.
Right.
Definitely my dog. It was Birdman wasn't keeping me together. I met Bird through Thug.
Right.
I wouldn't have met Bird if it wasn't for Thug. You know what I mean?
Right.
Young Thug's words reframed Rich Homie Quan's passing as something that deserved deeper examination, not quick closure. Whether the truth ever fully surfaces remains uncertain. But the conversation itself changed the tone. It forced listeners to question official stories, to look past surface narratives, and to understand that in this world, silence can be as dangerous as speaking. That may be the real legacy of his statement. For artists still inside the system, the moment served as a lesson. Watch who stands close when the spotlight fades. Pay attention to who disappears when leverage shifts. Survival, not talent, often decides longevity, and ignoring that reality has consequences that extend far beyond music. The streets don't forget patterns, and neither do the people forced to live inside them daily. That truth continues echoing, even as official explanations attempt to close the chapter quietly unresolved. The conversation around Rich Homie Quan didn't fade after the initial shock settled. Instead, it evolved into something heavier, more unsettling, because people began to realize this wasn't just about one artist or one moment in time. It was about a system that has a long history of quietly stepping back when protection is needed most. Young Thug's earlier words lingered in the background as fans, commentators, and insiders started connecting dots that had been ignored for years. Old business disputes resurfaced. Past interviews suddenly sounded different. Lyrics once dismissed as bravado were reinterpreted as warnings hidden in plain sight. In this world, artists often speak in code long before anything happens, and only after the damage is done do people realize the message was there all along. Quan's journey reflected that pattern painfully well. From chart dominance to industry sidelining, his path showed how quickly momentum can disappear when backing dries up. When the support structure collapses, vulnerability creeps in, and that vulnerability is rarely accidental. It's manufactured through neglect, pressure, and strategic distance. What made the situation even more disturbing was how familiar it felt. Hip-hop has lost too many voices under circumstances that raised more questions than answers, and each time, the official explanation arrives neatly packaged, ready to be accepted and forgotten. Young Thug's framing disrupted that cycle. By hinting at a setup, he forced the narrative into uncomfortable territory where blame isn't easily dismissed. A setup doesn't always mean a single mastermind or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it means being steered into chaos while others watch from a safe distance. Sometimes it means doors quietly closing until the room becomes dangerous. That's the version of reality many artists recognize but rarely speak about publicly. Quan's name joining that list triggered frustration among fans who felt like they had watched this movie before. The silence from powerful industry figures only reinforced that frustration. No urgent clarifications, no transparent explanations, just carefully managed distance. In an environment obsessed with control, silence becomes strategy. It allows speculation to burn while accountability stays untouched. Young Thug didn't need to spell everything out. The implication alone did the damage because it reminded people that truth in this industry is often buried under contracts and fear. As discussions spread, the focus shifted from mourning to mistrust, and once mistrust takes root, it doesn't disappear quietly. It reshapes how every past interaction is viewed. Every deal looks suspect. Every broken relationship feels intentional. Quan's story became less about how it ended and more about what happened long before the end arrived. That realization left a bitter taste because it suggested that the tragedy wasn't sudden at all, but slow, calculated, and ignored until it was too late. As time passed, the narrative surrounding Rich Homie Quan hardened into something closer to an indictment of the culture itself. Fans weren't just questioning individuals anymore, they were questioning the entire ecosystem that claims to nurture talent while quietly draining it. Young Thug's role in that conversation remained pivotal, not because he continued speaking, but because he didn't. His silence after the initial statement felt deliberate, almost respectful, yet loaded with meaning. In environments shaped by power, saying less often says more. People understood that pushing further could carry consequences, not just reputational, but real. That understanding added weight to his original claim. If someone with influence chooses restraint, it suggests the stakes are higher than public opinion. Quan's passing became a symbol of what happens when artists are left navigating pressure alone, surrounded by opportunists and stripped of protection. That's the kind of setup that doesn't require a dramatic plan, only indifference from those who could intervene. The industry response continued to follow a familiar script. Public tributes praised talent and legacy while avoiding any acknowledgement of systemic failure. It was easier to celebrate highlights than confront the uncomfortable truth that something went wrong long before the final chapter. For many observers, that disconnect felt insulting. Quan wasn't just a name on a playlist. He was a reminder of how disposable artists can become once their value is questioned. Young Thug's words forced people to sit with that reality. The idea of a setup wasn't just about blame, it was about warning the next generation. Pay attention to how quickly loyalty shifts. Notice who benefits when momentum slows. Understand that success doesn't guarantee safety. In this business, visibility can be both shield and target, and losing it can expose artists to risks most fans never see. Quan's story illustrated that brutal truth clearly. As debates continued online, one theme kept resurfacing: patterns. Patterns of artists being isolated. Patterns of sudden silence from former allies. Patterns of tragedy followed by corporate distance. Once people start recognizing patterns, denial becomes harder. Young Thug didn't need to campaign or repeat himself. The seed had already been planted. Conversations moved beyond gossip into something more reflective, more critical. That shift mattered. It signaled a growing awareness that the cost of fame isn't just personal, it's structural. Quan's passing forced a reckoning that many tried to avoid. Whether the full truth ever comes out is uncertain, but the damage to blind trust has already been done. The audience is watching more closely now. Artists are more cautious, and the industry, despite its silence, knows it's being scrutinized. That lingering tension is the real aftermath of Young Thug's statement. It ensures that Rich Homie Quan won't be remembered solely for how his story ended, but for what his story revealed about a system that too often looks away when accountability is needed most. As the dust slowly settled, the deeper implications of Rich Homie Quan's story began to weigh heavier than the initial shock ever did. What lingered wasn't just grief, but the uncomfortable awareness that the industry has mastered the art of distancing itself from responsibility. Young Thug's earlier comments continued to echo, not because they were repeated, but because nothing meaningful challenged them. That silence created space for reflection, and reflection turned into suspicion. People began asking why artists often seem most vulnerable after their peak moments fade. Success is marketed as protection, yet history shows it can become isolation once leverage shifts. Quan's career trajectory mirrored that pattern closely. When the spotlight dimmed, so did the safeguards. That's where the idea of a setup resonates most, not as a cinematic ambush, but as abandonment disguised as business. In environments driven by profit and image, stepping back can be as damaging as pushing forward recklessly. The culture surrounding hip-hop has long glorified resilience while ignoring how often that resilience is forced. Artists are expected to navigate pressure, betrayal, and public scrutiny without showing cracks. When something goes wrong, the narrative pivots quickly toward personal responsibility, quietly erasing the influence of gatekeepers and power brokers. Quan's situation challenged that habit. Fans revisited moments when support vanished without explanation, when alliances cooled overnight, and when momentum stalled despite proven talent. Those moments rarely happen by accident. They're shaped by decisions made behind closed doors, far from microphones and stages. Young Thug's framing pushed people to look at those decisions instead of accepting surface-level explanations. It reframed the conversation from what happened to who stepped away. That shift mattered because it exposed how control operates in subtle ways. Not every downfall needs sabotage. Sometimes all it takes is silence from the right people at the wrong time. Quan's story forced listeners to acknowledge that truth, even if it made the industry uncomfortable. The discomfort was visible in the lack of response, the carefully curated condolences, and the absence of accountability. That collective avoidance said more than any denial ever could. It reinforced the belief that certain truths are inconvenient, and inconvenient truths are best ignored. Yet once awareness spreads, it can't be undone. Quan's name became tied not just to music, but to a cautionary tale about visibility, power, and what happens when protection quietly disappears. By the time the conversation reached its later stages, it was no longer just about Rich Homie Quan or Young Thug. It had grown into a broader examination of survival inside an industry that rewards silence and punishes vulnerability. The idea of a setup transformed into a symbol, representing how artists can be steered toward danger without ever being directly pushed. That's the most unsettling part. There's rarely a single villain, just a chain of indifference, opportunism, and strategic distance. Quan's passing forced people to confront how normalized that chain has become. Fans started questioning not only past tragedies, but current ones in slow motion. Who is being isolated right now? Who has lost support without explanation? Who is being quietly written off while still standing? Those questions don't have easy answers, but they matter. They signal a shift from passive consumption to critical awareness. Young Thug's role in sparking that shift remains significant, even in absence. He didn't launch accusations or chase headlines. He simply disrupted the narrative enough to make people think. In a culture obsessed with immediacy, that kind of disruption is powerful. It leaves room for reflection instead of reaction. Quan's legacy now carries that weight, not just remembered for hits or charts, but as a reminder of what can happen when protection fades and silence takes over. The industry may move on, as it always does, but the audience is watching more closely now. Trust has been shaken, and once shaken, it doesn't reset easily. Artists entering the game are paying attention. Fans are listening differently. And stories like Quan's are no longer being accepted at face value. That change may be slow, but it's real. It represents a refusal to let uncomfortable truths disappear quietly. As this chapter closes, the conversation doesn't end. It continues in every question asked, every pattern noticed, and every silence examined. If this breakdown added clarity or value, make sure to show support by hitting like and subscribe so more stories like this continue to reach the surface.